Hello, everybody, and welcome to a victory green hour for the first time in like a month. It wasn't compelling, it wasn't dominating, it wasn't fun, but the Eagles got a victory and were able to take advantage of the Dallas Cowboys loss on Sunday against the Miami Dolphins as they hold a one-game lead with 2 to go, and they have tied for the best record in the NFC with San Francisco and Detroit. I'm your host, LJ Harrell, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Connor Donald. Connor, what's up, bud?
Not much, man. Happy holidays. Happy holidays, everybody listening. Hope you all had wonderful Christmases or whatever you celebrate. I hope it was wonderful beyond, the Eagles game on Monday. I mean, I never thought I'd say I'm so sad about winning a game, but this is not a team that is ready to go very deep in the playoffs. That
Def-
is pure and simple what it is and what is so frustrating.
yeah, definitely not. Not a team that looks like they're playoff ready. They're looking like a one and done team. Hopefully, over the next couple of weeks, they're able to figure things out. But I mean, it could be fool's gold because considering the teams that they will be playing. Before we dive deep into the game, as always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Greenhour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LJ54 and follow Edge of Philly Sports on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook at Edge of Philly Sports. And if you're tuning in live to the stream, let us know your thoughts on the game. Also, Christmas. If you guys got any Eagles merchandise for Christmas, let us know. I got a gift card to the pro shop, so I already bought a Kelsey jersey. I'm scared to buy a different jersey like a Hurts or a Devontae or an AJ Brown. Just maybe I'll get a Jalen Carter. Who knows? I don't know. I am scared to purchase one of them because typically whenever I purchase an Eagles jersey, that player either tanks, gets traded, gets cut, doesn't last long with the team. So we'll see. And then I got an Eagles panoramic view puzzle of Lincoln Financial Field. So I'm going to put that together and then like have it. I don't know what the hell they call it, paste it, whatever, so it stays together. I don't know what they call it.
Paste it and frame it.
Yeah, something like that. It'll be something that I can do. I mean, I do have a little bit of free time right now as it is, so maybe it's something I can work on. But yeah, so let's jump into this game. The Eagles were able to defeat the New York Giants 33-25 at the half. The Eagles were up 20-3, and it felt like they should have had 30 points. They've started off games. Their first drives have been really good. But then after that, like their opening scripts have been good. And then after that, it's like they forget what the heck they're due. They forget what the heck they're good at. And then it's just downhill from there. And I know they'll throw a drive here, a drive there to score. But, I mean, they have not looked good. And at the end of the first half, Jalen had a boneheaded mistake where he cut inside instead of outside and got fortunate where there was probably a ticky-tack delay of game call on the Giants, which allowed the Eagles to go for a timeout. So I don't know if Jalen forgot that they didn't have a timeout or thought he could score a touchdown, but whatever it was, not good. A good job right there by Jalen. And the Eagles were fortunate that they weren't playing a better team. And B, Tyrod Taylor didn't start the whole game. If Tyrod Taylor starts the game, it could be different because Tommy DeVito sucks. Tommy DeVito was awful. And if Taylor starts the whole game, maybe it's a totally different game in that first half.
Yeah, I agree. I actually think if Tyrod Taylor starts the whole game, it's a very different final score, potentially a loss. Who even knows? Because Tyrod Taylor was doing some really good things, and the Tommy DeVito thing that that had to come to an end eventually. He just wasn't one of those. He wasn't a guy who was standing out in a way like this guy's really talented. He's going to take over. He was doing what would like a simple game plan. He was doing what he was told to do with it, and eventually we knew it had to come to an end, and it's coming to an end. Otherwise, I mean, you nailed it. Like we should have been up by a lot more. This continuation of drives ending without scores or ending in field goals is just becoming really hard to watch. I mean, well, we had 4 field goals, so 33 points. 12 of those were field goals. Like that's just at some point we have to be converting some of these into actual touchdowns, because these are the difference makers that come playoff games. These are the difference makers when it matters. You look back and you say, well, if we had gotten this score in the red zone versus a field goal or vice versa, like it's a completely different situation. And unfortunately, we continue to struggle to find a way to just find the end zone on occasions where we really need to start finding it. So that was definitely frustrating. I mean, it was good to see the run game get going. I mean, DeAndre Swift had a good game. Jalen Hurts had a decent game running. 8 for 34 is not, a huge Jalen Hurts line, but it's a respectable one. It was good to see Swift go for 20 and 92. But again, turnovers and ball control also continue to remain a major problem for this team. Another thing that's going to be a big difference maker come the playoffs. If you cannot control the ball, we had 4 fumbles. I think we only lost 2, thankfully. Only lost 1. So we only lost 1 out of 4 fumbles, but usually we lose more. And then an interception by Jalen Hurts. It's becoming a story over and over and over again. The mistakes that this offense is making, not getting into the end zone, and also in their ball ability to keep the ball for an extended period of time without making a crucial mistake or a fumble or an interception.
Yeah, the first fumble was the bad snap over Jalen's right shoulder, but he made a good play. Was able to get the ball to Grant Calcaterra, his first catch, first target of the year, and able to get a first down. So that was good to see. The fumble at the start of the second half, where Isaiah Simmons pretty much threw Olamide Zaccheaus into Boston Scott, and then after that, they were scared to return kicks again. They didn't want to force a fumble, so they just kept fair catching, which I don't like that rule. If you fair catch anywhere between the goal line and the 25, it comes out to the 25. I think it's stupid. I mean, whatever. But yeah, so mistake, the interception by Hurts. I mean, he threw the ball before Goddard made his cut and then he slipped. It wasn't a hurt on Hurts, but I mean, it was an interception return for a touchdown, and the Eagles had a chance to go down and go up 2 scores. Or it was that when it was 20-10 at the time? No, that was when it was 30 to 18, I think. And then the Eagles were going down. He threw the interception that made it 30 to 25. So yeah, like a game that was unnecessarily close. And I have a buddy who's a Giants fan. I told he's like, you guys are going to win. And I was like, I have a bad feeling about this game. Like, just the way we've been playing, the vibes on this team are not good right now.
No, because you had AJ Brown, who didn't want to make a comment, didn't want to speak to the media because he said, I have nothing good to say, nothing nice to say, or nothing good to say. Devontae Smith put it pretty bluntly, like whatever culture was built that everyone was buying into, it just doesn't seem there. Like, and Kelsey, it's almost a false start a game now. Are they questionable sometimes? Yes, but they're a penalty nonetheless. And to me, it feels like the leaders in the room just aren't like, I feel like Kelsey's kind of tapped out. Like, I feel like some guys who used to be leaders in this room and be more vocal are just waiting for maybe Jalen to be vocal, for somebody else to be the voice and the leader in the locker room, because you do need the youth to start to become a voice. You can't just have Lane Johnson, Jason Kelsey, Brandon Graham, these guys be the leaders and the voices in the locker room forever, because this could be the last year for, it's not going to be the last year for all of them, but theoretically it could be the last year for 3 of them. So you need to have other voices in the locker room, and it just doesn't feel like anybody wants to be it.
I think coming into this year, the expectations were so high for this team after the Super Bowl loss last year and the team that they had on paper, that the only way that this would be, in fans' eyes, the only way this would be a successful season for the Philadelphia Eagles is if they win the Super Bowl. And they were 10-1, and they look like the most miserable 10-1 team I've ever seen. Went on that 3-game losing streak, got to 10-4, and then all the doubt came in, all the pouncing on like this team is not very good. All the close close game wins finally came back to bite them in the butt. And like, it's probably the media's fault, probably our fault that they're feeling this way because of the expectations that they have. Because like all the weight that's on Jalen Hurts' shoulders, coming in as an MVP favorite, all the weight that's on AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and the offensive line, like you're bound to break to pressure. And they kind of did the last 3 weeks. And like, you can't fault them for that. Like, no team is going to be perfect. Was it the 72 Dolphins or whatever it was that went undefeated through the Super Bowl? Like, it's not going to happen. Like the Patriots did it all the way to the Super Bowl and then lost. Like, it's a lot of pressure, and this team is feeling like the vibes aren't right. You mentioned the culture. It just doesn't feel like the culture is the same as it was last year. And again, granted, it was an easier schedule. They were blowing teams out. So in the second half, it was kind of a cakewalk for most games. But they're just, it's not the same as we've seen over the last year and a half, 2 years. And as fans, we see that and we're like it doesn't look good. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't seem good, even if they are winning games, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, earlier in the season, we had a lot of people who come to the comments. We said a win's a win, and now we're to the point now where a win it isn't just a win anymore. Like, you sit there and you scrutinize it, and with good reason. Now, one of the reasons I was around a bunch of family who were watching, and I said from the very beginning, I was like, I don't know, I don't feel good about this, I don't like this, and they're like, well, it's just the Giants. But first of all, I never take divisional games for granted. That was my biggest thing. I don't take divisional games for granted ever. Exactly. You just don't know. And ironically enough, the Chiefs are in a similar situation to the Eagles. Like, the sky high expectations, the culture there, the meltdowns on the sidelines week in and week out. Like, we may not have the sideline meltdowns, but you can just tell it's seems like a deflated and defeated team. And it almost looks the same over on Kansas City side, which is hard to watch too, because both of these teams had really good seasons last year, looked like they could have been headed towards a repeat, potentially, although it doesn't happen often and it's very rare and stuff. But like, there were some people who were talking about it, and like, these guys, there's some guys who really want to win. They keep coming back because they want that championship. And I mean, this could be the end for the Chiefs. It was like, oh, it's a sky high, like, the dynasty feel. Are they the next Patriots? Which arguably I would say we witnessed the only Patriots, the only dynasty in our lifetime, at least my lifetime, because it was literally through my lifetime, through the early 2000s and right up until I was as big of a fan as I am now. So, I mean, I just think you get those rare moments and those rare circumstances. And not that I doubt Mahomes or Reed, you just reach certain times and circumstances where it becomes really difficult. Patrick Mahomes can only do so much. I mean, they lead the NFL in drops as receivers and stuff. And when you're paying someone $50 million a year, it really changes the entire landscape of how you can build your team and what you can do. And I also think that obviously Howie's starting to feel that too. You look towards this offseason, you look at who can we restructure? How can we open up cap space? Unless you're kicking the can down the road with some of these older guys again and again and again, which here we are, the Darius Slay, the James Bradbury argument, all this discussion about these older guys. Eventually, you just have to let these contracts expire and eat what is there instead of putting more at the end of the road. But you start to feel it when you actually have to. That's why it's so vitally important to win with a quarterback on the rookie contract, because it becomes so
That's why the 49ers
costly.
are under pressure.
Yeah, because they need to get this win with Brock Purdy under the contract he's under over the next couple years, or else, eventually you have to pay the guy. And, you never know. Maybe it could be like, I don't think he's as bad as Daniel Jones, but maybe it could end up looking like a Daniel Jones type contract where he gave you a year where it made you really really think and say, should we pay this guy? And you make the mistake. But you're seeing it around the NFL a lot, where you start to pay these quarterbacks and every position feels like they should be more valued and that they're more valuable. Look at the tackles, look at the edges, look at the defensive tackles. Like, there's just so many players looking for historic numbers that eventually it starts to just become an impossible task to feed these historic numbers. But I know that this is just kind of a rant, but yeah, but that's what you start to see. You're starting to see in Philadelphia. You're starting to see in Kansas City. Like some of these financial circumstances are becoming a little too much to overcome, and cultures are changing. Some of your vets are starting to seem like really like they may be starting to tap out on you. So it makes it really tough to
Because
watch.
like Sirianni's shtick, Sirianni's emotions, maybe for older guys, it could wear thin. I don't know how it is wearing on the team. I mean, in this press conference today, somebody asked, like, it didn't seem like the team was excited, even though it was after a win. And he said, oh, believe me, we're 100% we're excited. But like you saw Devontae Smith's interview, just like, I mean, we're 11-4, but we're not playing well. So, I mean, we'll see what happens, going forward. Like this week, it's a big game. I mean, it's going to be Jonathan Gannon's Super Bowl pretty much, going up against his former team, and they've been playing. Even though the wins aren't amounting, they've been playing well. They got a good quarterback, some good players on defense. So it's going to be interesting to see, this upcoming game. But let's talk about this game. The Eagles jumped out to a 7-0 lead after the really good opening drive. Did a bunch of different things, and Jalen was on point. Jalen was running. Devontae got involved. DeAndre Swift got involved. So like it was nice to see. And then they stalled out until the second quarter. It didn't make any sense. Like as I mentioned earlier, the opening drive, the opening script it feels like it's really good, and then it just goes downhill from there. I don't know who's creating the opening script. I don't know if that's Sirianni creating it, and then Brian Johnson goes and calls the plays, or if say Brian Johnson is, creating the opening script, and then Sirianni has input, or even Jalen Hurts, because that was reported, has input on what plays to call next. So that'll be interesting. Steve, thanks for joining us. Can we do some variation of Devontae Smith motion? It's a damn run every time. No, they're so predictable. Like if it's under center, it's going to be a run 99.9% of the time. They threw it yesterday on one, but then the rest was runs. When Devontae moves, it's usually a run. So yeah, it'd be nice if they could do something different. Now they tried, like Calcaterra got involved, Britton Covey got involved. Granted, they were one catches each. Quez Watkins was on the field for one snap. That is a positive. He wasn't on the field a lot. Alameda Zaccheaus had a great block on Devontae Smith's 36-yard touchdown pass and catch, and took a Dory Jackson, pretty much planted him through the end zone. That was awesome, seeing the wide receiver block like that. And finally, I can't believe that was Hurts' first passing touchdown since, if I'm not mistaken, since October. That was an astounding stat. Like, I know he has 15 rushing touchdowns, 19 passing. He's 34 total touchdowns. But the fact that was his first passing touchdown, if I'm not mistaken, since October, that is ridiculous.
I mean, I get it. Like we get down inside, like inside the 10, and we just let the running backs do it, and then we get it to 1 or 2 yards out, and then the tush push comes. I get why we don't see it that often, because when we do get to the red zone, we tend to just dominate on the ground and just finish it off that way. But I agree with you. The fact that there isn't any big plays in there's nothing mixed in there to give him a pass and touchdown since October is very worrisome. And we talked about, plays that stalled out. You talked about that first drive, and then we had an 18-play, 72-yard drive that ended in a field goal. Yeah. And we had an 11-play drive, 72 yards, ended in a field goal. Those just can't happen. Like, you need to cash in on those. When you get inside, like inside the 30, inside the 20, those need to start being converted into touchdowns and not field goals. We're probably talking a lot more confidently and feeling a lot better if this is just a straight up blowout, because like you said about last year, we were blowing teams out. We were doing what we were supposed to be doing. We can't even blow out the teams or dominate the teams we should be dominating or blowing out. Granted, we kind of said it, this is a divisional game. It feels like you go into every divisional game, you could be 15-0 playing a 0-15 team, and it'll end up a one-score game or less. It just happens that way. That's just how divisional matchups seem to shake out. But these are the plays you look back on. If one of those can be converted into a touchdown, the score's 40-25. Obviously, some things could be different, but obviously you're looking at a 2-score game. And like, I get 10 points as a 2-score game, but 14 points feels a lot better as a 2-score game than 10 points. And it's just frustrating.
It was an 8-point win, so it was still a 1-score game.
Exactly. Like, it still feels better, like, to have it be, a couple touchdowns. And that's just what is excruciating about that. And like you said, they continued to stall out. Then the second half began, and there was a fumble. There was a 3-play 5-yard drive that ended in a punt, the interception touchdown. It just all went downhill so fast. And then back-to-back drives, then the game with field goals. 7 plays, 32 yards, 9 plays, 50 yards, still ending in field goals over and over again. And those could have been
easily.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. He's his team MVP by a landslide. But I mean, ultimately, some of those, like, maybe those field goals were self-preserving. Obviously, let's keep it a 10-point game. Let's keep it 11-point game, whatever it was. But even then, though, it was way too close to be self-preserving. You had to try and get that extra score, get that additional score. And it just doesn't feel like this offense has that oomph to get those scores and those extra points added onto the board that we need. That's going to be crucial come the playoffs.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about the defense. I think they played well. They there was obviously the pick six that wasn't counted against them, and then it was they had the fumble at the beginning of the second quarter. Like, they were put in a bad position inside the 10. So, like, if you think about it, the defense gave up 11 points, 10 points. Like, they played well. Like, while they haven't been creating turnovers and they haven't been getting much pressure, they've played a little bit better under Patricia's watch. Calling the defense. Again, 25 points makes it look bad, but again, pick six, fumble inside the 10. That'll change things up. Steven says, you guys starting to notice Nolan Smith is a legit linebacker in a legit linebacker position lately? Is that just because of the thinness at the position, or a salvage move for the year? I think for yesterday, it was, you had Shaq Leonard, Ben Van Summeren, and then Brandon Smith called up off the pack. I think yesterday was because of the depth. Nolan Smith, he didn't do bad, but I don't think they drafted him to be a off-the-ball linebacker. I think they drafted him to get after the pass rusher. It was just, I think yesterday was more of a, we need, break glass in case of emergency, and they had to break that glass. But Shaq Leonard played really well, easily his best game since he's been with the Eagles. Got his first sack. I couldn't believe it was his first sack since 2021. I had to go and check the stats again when I heard that. His first sack since 2021, and obviously he only played 3 games last year. But the first half, I think he had 4 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a sack. Had ended the game with 7 total tackles. He looked really, really good. And I think he's getting comfortable in this defense. And I think we'll start seeing him more. And he could potentially, if you get a healthy Slay back, you get Zach Cunningham back, you get Avonte Maddox back, you get Leonard playing, starting to feel comfortable playing. I'm not going to say he's going back to his all-pro form, but playing better than what we had. Put Kaylee Ringo in there over James Bradbury. This defense could potentially look a lot different and a lot better first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're definitely trending up. They're trending in the right direction on defense, which is weird to say because they were given so much flack during that stretch against, the tougher teams like Dallas and the San Francisco game where they were giving up a ton of points. But they were left pretty much stranded on the field, losing the time of possession battle by quite a bit. So put them in a position where they really couldn't succeed. Or the offense was putting them in a position where they really couldn't succeed. On the Nolan Smith front, yeah, it's definitely was thinness at the position because he was not good in coverage. I mean, he had 2 targets, 2 receptions for 34 yards, and he was only out there in coverage on 3 possessions. They knew they went for him when he was in coverage, That's just not what he was drafted to be. I mean, a lot of people talked about, oh, he's going to be like a mini Hassan Reddick or something along those lines when he was drafted. I mean, it's up for discussion, obviously. Nolan Smith was, kind of that pick where he was kind of a luxury pick. Could we have went with more of a need than Nolan Smith? We can talk about that down the road, but hopefully he turns into something more, and he becomes what we want him to become. But he's got to be out on the field more. I think he will too. He's just got to be out on the field more, and that's what's frustrating because you probably have to have him come in as like, a fifth rusher. You're going to have to use him in unique ways while you have Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat on the outside, or you can kick Josh Sweat inside, which we've seen that type of creativity in the defense before as well. If you want to try and take advantage of some matchups that way. But you have to find ways to get him on the field, get him more involved, and get him more comfortable because it's frustrating when you invest in a pick like that and you're just not using them, when how frustrating the linebacker position has been to watch as well. Use an extra safety to come down and bring a fifth rusher, get creative, try and get Nolan Smith involved and do what he does best. And that's pass rush. So hopefully that begins to change. It probably isn't going to change as this season goes on because it doesn't feel like they're going to make any dramatic changes to their game plans. They just want to stay the course and try and squeeze out the wins. I disagree. I think they need to make some dramatic shifts and make them now against these teams where you can test this stuff out. But it's so far, the Nolan Smith thing's a little frustrating. Keely Ringo's done it extremely well. I think you need to get him more. He deserves to start. He deserves to be in there at a minimum. With Slay, when Slay's back and healthy and Bradbury's there and healthy, they're not going to pull them off the field much, but there should be more of a split to give those guys rest and give them an opportunity to be fresher, because I think Slay and Bradbury are at their best when they're fresh and when they're not always on the field and being picked on, as we've seen in some recent weeks where they'll start to pick on one of them and they end up with a really bad week. So it would be nice if they did that.
The last two drives, all the passing yards were against James Bradbury.
Exactly.
And then Keely Ringo was able to get the interception in the end zone to end the game. But yeah, I think Bradbury is cooked right now.
Bradbury was targeted the second most, tied for the most with Bradley Roby. And the only reason Bradley Roby was targeted more was not because he's not good, but it's because it's just how the Giants play. They target more of the slot guys. They don't go outside often. And James Bradbury obviously just plays in the slot or plays outside a lot more. So
I also didn't like Reed Blankenship on Slayton on the long touchdown pass. Like that's a mismatch. You can't have Blankenship in coverage. Some of the things Steve's saying, there was a lot of arrow up progress yesterday that got overshadowed by some complete boneheadedness. I actually agree with that. Again, we mentioned the Jalen at the end of that first half. Jalen cut inside instead of going out of bounds. The start the second half, the fumble. If the Eagles don't, if the Giants don't at the end of the first half don't have that delay of game penalty, and then the Eagles they don't kick a field goal there, and then the Eagles fumble again like they did in the first to start the second half, like that game changes there. Like it's so the Eagles had 9 penalties. It was just a really, really bad day. Steve also says
I couldn't agree more on that front. I feel like they're just overthinking things sometimes. So the arrow points up for a lot of things, and then you just see them overthinking things or missing things. Like you watch Jalen Hurts, sometimes I feel like he's getting back to some of his ways where he tucks too early or he flushes out. Like we could say week in and week out, he flushes out to a certain side when there's somebody open. Like they show, obviously you're not in the mind of the quarterback in this situation, but when they show like situations where like wide receivers running wide open, and it happens at least almost once a quarter where the broadcast is showing a wide receiver running wide open and he's flushing out a certain way, or he's already committed to running, or he just wasn't comfortable, or he doesn't seem comfortable in the pocket. I don't find that the offensive line has been that bad. Like I feel he should be more confident and more comfortable in the pocket. And we've talked about it in the past. Like it just feels like Jalen Hurts is losing confidence as a pocket passer. And I feel like it's not at any fault of the offense. The offensive line has had some games, yes, but I don't think it's a fault of the offensive line. You see it. He flushes out quickly. He turns to the run quickly. it just doesn't feel like he wants to take the extra 1 or 2 seconds and trust his offensive line and make that tough throw or make that throw while being hit. It doesn't feel, and we've said that all year, it just doesn't feel like he wants to take hits because he's been running scared too. So it just doesn't feel like the tough Jalen that we were used to. And I feel like that's affecting him from a running perspective and from a pocket perspective.
Yeah, I agree. It's something different about Jalen. Steve also says if you're going to run bubbles, use Covey. Get Devontae off the field for Julio. Let the big bodies block. And
I don't actually hate the idea of you getting Covey more involved offensively, but it has to be scheme specific, just exactly like Steven noted. This isn't a guy who we've traditionally used a whole lot on the offense because we use him strictly as a punt returner, and he's done some amazing stuff. Like more you, but I was starting to get on the train last year because I was getting frustrated with how he was playing, and then he started to crank it up at the end of the year, and now he's been really good this year. But like you see how shifty he can be, you see how quick he can be. Like if you don't want to get one of the running backs involved in a bubble screen type play, I mean Britton Covey's a great guy, and he's a guy who can take a hit and hold on to the football. So he's at least a guy you can trust to make that play, and he's shifty, he's quick. If he can do what he can do on punt returns, he can probably have some sort of minimal role on the offensive side of the ball.
He had that nice 54-yard punt return that was very unexpected, and he leads the league in punt return yardage and is second in punt return average. So like he's definitely having a Pro Bowl year. See if he can get the votes to get into the Pro Bowl. Steve also says I was completely amazed by Van Sumeren. As a Michigan fan, this dude couldn't start for them, which I think in Michigan he was a tight end or a fullback. He was on the offensive side of the ball, and then had the transfer and wasn't good at MSU. He was a pleasant surprise yesterday. Yeah, I'm shocked. Well, it is again. Preface it by it was the Giants. And like I think if it was a different offense, they could have taken advantage of that. But so fortunately, the Eagles were going up against Tommy DeVito to start. And again, if Tyrod Taylor starts the game, maybe it's a totally, completely different game. Steve says, take an improved and integrated Leonard and Byard, a healthy Maddox, Slay, Cunningham, and you may get a very pleasant, surprising playoff defense. Get the 1 seed, and these old asses may look great. I don't know if they're going to get the 1 seed. You need San Fran. You need to beat Arizona and the Giants. You need Detroit to lose to Dallas, or lose one of their last 2 games. So, I mean, I'm not rooting for Dallas, but you would need potentially Dallas to win on Saturday. And San Fran to lose one more. They have San Fran has Washington and the Rams left, I think.
What's crazy is it looks like it's going to actually force these 3 teams to play starters week 18 because it's starting to really look like it's at least going to matter for 2 of these teams. Like, it's going to matter for at least 2 of these teams. And I mean, if Dallas is able to beat Detroit next week, well, same thing. Then it starts to matter more for Dallas to get the wins. So
the San Fran losing yesterday and the Eagles winning, that makes that that Seattle game look all the worse because like the Eagles would be the number 1 seed right now if they would have beaten Seattle with a little wiggle room, a tiny bit of wiggle room. But now like they have to win out if they want to get the 1 seed. If Detroit wins now if Detroit wins Saturday and the Eagles win Sunday, the Eagles win the East. So like they get that taken care of. But they would still need Detroit to lose a game because and Detroit has Minnesota week 18 because Detroit would have a better strength of victory, strength of record, whatever. Or conference
but I say here with the way that we've been playing, I say, do we want that? Like the only reason the week off is good is for the people who are banged up and for the older guys who probably need a week to rest up. But do we want that week off? Unless I see dramatic improvements, like I need it.
The path is easier as the 2 seed because if you get the 1 seed, you potentially have to face both Dallas and San Francisco. You get the 2 seed, you would get. Now the Rams are playing really well, but you get the Rams or Seattle or Green Bay. Green Bay is a long shot. And then in the divisional round, Detroit comes to Philly. And then you would get San Francisco and San Francisco. Or if Dallas happens to upset San Francisco, you host the NFC Championship game against Dallas. Like instead of facing both San Francisco and Dallas potentially, you would only have to face one of them. And I get it. Everybody, you want to have the bye week to get your team healthy, get your team rest. But I mean, it might be better for the Eagles to get the 2 seed.
Both, yeah, like strength of schedule wise, definitely, but also if unless we dramatically improve and blow the teams out these next 2 weeks and see huge improvements, I kind of feel we'd be in a better spot to play our way to, round two, round three, maybe the Super Bowl. Take the hard way because it feels like we need the hard way to be able to get this again. Imagine if we have a week of rest and the way that we've been playing without any rest, just week in, each week, seeing no improvements, the same frustrations continuing to boil over, and you get a week off and then you come back. I just feel like we'd be behind the 8 ball for the probably the first half of that game, and then you're playing from behind probably in the second half. We're trying to make the it to me. I don't know that's my thoughts at this point. I'd have to see like a dramatic shift, and like you said, strength of schedule. It almost feels like having the 2 seeds better, but I also think it would just be better that these guys are forced to play and try and get this right.
Yeah, I mean, we both didn't want them to play Week 18 because of that field in Jersey, but they might be forced to. Steve next says, this year has been an exercise of an extended defensive preseason and an offense that is adjusting to having way more pressure on it. Hurts is feeling more pressure to deliver and is adjusting. I do agree that he has and we mentioned it earlier in the show. He has a lot of pressure on his shoulders, and I'm not saying that he's breaking, but I think as a team, you're starting to see the cracks a little bit, and hopefully they're able to get it back, mold it together over the next couple of weeks heading into the playoffs. I mean, getting that win yesterday. Now, we hated how it happened, like how close it was, the way it looked, but that was huge for them. Like, can you imagine what today would have been like on sports radio if they would have lost that game and they'd be on 4 games and Dallas having been on 2? Like, Dallas is trying to give you the division and you just keep handing it right back to them. Like, it would have just been really bad. So,
well, and I've been getting updates, all like athletic updates and all these other ones who are writing articles about it, and there is nothing positive that came from this win from a media perspective. And I mean, I don't blame them. I mean, I think there's more positives than the media is going to give, obviously, because more people are going to read and react to negative media and overreactions. But there's not a lot of positive, and so I can only imagine what's like in Philadelphia on the sports radio stations. They're probably acting as if it's a loss, but
of course,
I mean, it's frustrating, but and I don't even know if I would call it a get right game. I don't even know if they got right because the team is still really frustrated by the play. But we have to take this win because we needed it. It was going to put us in a really bad spot, and instead of sitting here talking about a potential 1 seed, 2 seed scenario, we could be looking at something far worse. But we got the win, and I think you have to look at that as a positive. I still would like us. I still think that we need to. I hate the idea of playing on that New York field, as this comment's going to allude to. But I mean, we still need to keep getting things right. I mean,
so
if you get into the playoffs and it takes you 1 or 2 quarters to get things right in the playoffs, that's enough that you might just lose.
Yeah, Steve says, so if Dallas loses and we lock up the 3 seed, do you give your team a bye or do you risk playing hard on that crappy New York field? Well, if Dallas loses Saturday and we win Sunday, it wouldn't clinch the 3. It would clinch at least the 3. We would still have the potential, depending on what happens with San Francisco and then going forward. It would we still have the potential to get the 2 or the 1. So like they might go into that game against the Giants, like they're gonna have to play at least early on. Like maybe you scoreboard watch, and if the score plays out to where like Detroit is playing Minnesota and Detroit's up big, and then you start pulling stuff, let Mariota play and all the backups. But I think it's gonna, at least at the start of Week 18, you're gonna be still playing for something, whether it's the 1 or 2 seed or the NFC East, whatever it is. The Eagles are still going to be playing. Steve also says, no team in the history of the NFL has lost its top 5 tacklers from one year to the next ever. This is the first. They are really starting to see that. Like, they lost 6 starters from the defense last year. And look, they upgraded. Like, is Jalen Carter better than Javon Hargrave? They might be on par right now, but I mean, Jalen Carter is going to be better. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is better than Byard. So, like, that's a given. TJ Edwards is better than TJ Edwards, and maybe even and Kaiser White both might be better than what we have at linebacker. I would say yes, they are better.
I mean, I would say like if Zach Cunningham, if we probably had him from week one, I would probably say Cunningham was better than Kaiser White, but we didn't have it that with TJ Edwards for sure. Like, but that's just to the same point, like that often our top five tacklers often end up being a linebacker or safety, just like any other team. And we know Howie Roseman, especially a linebacker, does not value a linebacker. He's not going to pay a linebacker. If Zach
That
Cunningham
needs to
warrants
change.
any attention this offseason, he's not coming back to Philadelphia because Howie's just going to say, see you later. I'll
I
get
wonder
some
if Shaq
other
Leonard comes
cheap
back.
guy.
I think they could get Shaq on a like he's only going to have played a handful of games here. Maybe his relationship, if Sirianni's back, which I mean we're anticipating he's going to be back, but unless something catastrophic happens. But if maybe Shaq Leonard will come back and he'll, depending on who they hire as defensive coordinator, if it's Patricia or if they go outside and bring somebody in, that he's comfortable with, maybe he'll come back for a year, kind of get a 1 year prove it deal, and then he'll be 28, 29 next year and kind of try to go for one more contract. Who knows? But I mean, maybe they have to get some stability somewhere. Like Byard's only has 1 year left. Again, are we going to lose another safety? Another line? Like they have
I mean,
to.
at this point, one of your biggest cost saving moves is to dump Kevin Byard. You pay the guy 15 million, or you save yourself over $10 million. So I mean, it
Unless he
to
takes a
me,
team-friendly hometown discount.
or he does how he does his usual thing where he extends them for 2 or 3 more years, and then we sit here and revisit this discussion next year, just like we have revisited the Darius Slay discussion and say, why did you extend this guy? Why did you do that? All for the cost savings measure, and here we are cursing you out for this situation and all the dead money. Like that just feel to me, keeping Byard around has all the makings of a similar reaction to everything that happened to the Darius Slay extension of this offseason. And it's just eventually, yes, you have to find that stability, but you have to stop going with these 1 year guys or waiting so long to give these guys an opportunity. Like we had TJ Edwards around and he just sat behind, like similar to Nakobe Dean, but we're seeing why we couldn't trust Nakobe Dean maybe. But you have these guys sit, and then by the final year of their contract, they explode like TJ Edwards, and you can't afford to keep them anymore. So maybe start using these guys from the beginning, some of the youth that you want to buy into and believe in, the Nolan Smiths of the world. If you want to buy into these guys, buy into them earlier than year 3, where you start to see them come along in year 4 where they explode and then leave in year 5 for this big free agent market. Maybe give that opportunity to some of these younger guys and stop burying them behind 1 year guys.
I mean, I guess it depends on who the defensive coordinator is. Like they like to have veterans out there, but we'll see. But I do think that the experience that Ricks and Ringo are getting, we could definitely see Ringo on the field next year. Sidney Brown could be a starter on the field next year. If we'll see what happens with Dean, but we anticipate he'll be a starter next year. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, starters next year. So I mean, I think maybe even I doubt Nolan Smith, but maybe Nolan Smith too. Like they do have a lot of young guys now that have gotten a lot of playing time and getting a lot of experience and could help them going forward. So let's see what else. Steve says, I'm not a big fan of Dan Campbell, I'm not a big Dan Campbell fan and could see Detroit losing either of these last 2 games. I'm not a big Dan Campbell fan either. I think they're overrated. I would feel a lot better going up against Jared Goff outside in the elements in Philly than in the dome.
Because aren't they in the middle of a stretch where Jared Goff doesn't leave a dome field for like
because
4
Dallas
weeks
is
or
dome,
6 weeks or something?
Minnesota, even if that Minnesota game's in Minnesota, that's a dome. Like I don't remember the last time they played outside.
I remember when he played that last outside game and he was going on a trip where he wasn't going to see the outside element. And I think his record outside when the elements are a factor is actually not very good in the month of December. I think he's a very bad December quarterback, mostly because of the outside elements. So you get a Jared Goff in round 1, or round 2, you're probably feeling pretty good.
Especially if it's home, yeah. And Steve says, after watching Baltimore and San Francisco, Howie may finally open or spend a high draft pick.
I don't
chance. See it happening.
No,
Unless Trotter
no
drops
chance.
to like the second round, I don't think it's going to happen, but who knows? Maybe like he finally started drafting SEC players, Alabama and Georgia players. Maybe he'll finally draft one linebacker. Who knows? But it like seeing Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen, just seeing them run all over the field, making plays, being difference makers. I miss those days when we had Trot and whatnot. Roaming in the middle of the defense, striking fear in opposing offenses. That's what we do need, but how he just doesn't prioritize that. Will he change? Who knows? But
I mean, I'd even be all for a like Malcolm Jenkins. He helped you man multiple positions at any given time. So, like, even if you invested in a safety, because I don't trust Reed Blankenship or Sidney Brown to be one of those guys who can roam the field like Malcolm Jenkins did. And I mean, you are talking about Hall of Fame players and trying to compare these guys to Hall of Fame players. But the point is a guy you can trust to play the slot, be a linebacker, be a single high safety, be a two high safety, be able to do it in any circumstance. But we just haven't been able to find that where we're able to trust a linebacker, where we're able to trust a safety to take that role, because it automatically helps your defense become so much more comfortable if you have just one really competent, like Steven's mentioning, Kyle Hamilton, just one extremely competent player in the middle of the field. It can change things. And we just haven't had that really competent player in the middle of the field since, I would argue, since Malcolm Jenkins, where teams would fear the middle of the field or where they'd have to think about the middle of the field. There's always somebody that they know they can go and pick on.
Yep, Malcolm was that dude. And of course they had that issue with his contract or whatever. But looking at the final stats, the Eagles had 465 yards of total offense. The Giants only had 292. And again, turnovers is what kept the Giants in the game. Hurts had over 300 yards passing for the first time in like a month and a half, 2 months. 170 yards rushing. Again, and the defense 4-14 on third down, but the Giants were 3 of 5 on fourth down. So still have to work on that. The Eagles were 8 of 15 on third down, 2 of 2 on fourth down. Only had 1 sack. Again, that's something that all the assets that the Eagles put to the defensive line, and they just can't get pressure. And it was a bad offensive line that the Giants have. So we'll see what happens against Arizona. And again, they're going up against Kyler Murray this week, who can run around and move around. I don't know who they're going to have spy on. Maybe that's a Sidney Brown thing. Have Sidney Brown spy.
And then the penalties, 9 for 65 versus 3 for 13. And at the end of the day, I get it. People are going to sit there and you can nitpick penalties. Penalties happen, and you just have to try and be as disciplined as humanly possible. And just some of those things, the Jalen Hurts, the horse collar, that's just not necessary. That should let the guy score. It's done. It was a pick six. It was a pick six. Your frustration doesn't need to come out. I mean, it didn't have much of an impact on anything because I think it was tacked onto the kickoff, and nobody returns on a kickoff anyways.
No, they went for 2 after that.
They ended up going for 2. So it did impact things. Like, you just don't just be disciplined, make the right decisions, be disciplined, ball security. Like, we own time of possession. It was 34-25. We know we need to own that time of possession. It was, like we said, it was good to see like 170 yards rushing on 35 rushing attempts for 4.9 yards per rush. That was good to see. It's good to see some of those things, but we got to kind of stick to what we do best.
In the second year in a row that the Eagles have 1,000-yard receivers. Devontae went over 1,000 yesterday, and DeAndre Swift is 12 yards away from 1,000 rushing yards. And again, Jalen Hurts broke Cam Newton's NFL record for most rushing yards by a quarterback in NFL history, as he picked up his 15th. Of his 15, 11 of them are 1-yard touchdown runs. Look, they count for the same points. It doesn't matter if it's a 50-yard run or a 1-yard run. It counts all the same. So
imagine if they knew to draw that play for Cam Newton back in the day. I mean, he'd probably have a lot more than 15.
They had that third and one where they did they did an RPO or whatever, or zone read, and Swift lost 4 yards. They could have, and again, Sirianni had talked about it in this press conference today that, like, obviously hindsight being 2020, if it's 3rd and 1, just do the tush push, get the first down. and then have a clean set of downs to go about your day. So good. Again, the Eagles got the win. All wins aren't the same, while they are the same, but like it didn't feel like a win. It was a frustrating game. It should have, again, the Eagles should have put up 30 in the first half. Probably should have scored 50 in the game. They only scored 33, and it was unnecessarily a lot closer than it needed to be. But they are in first place in the NFC East, tied for the best record in the NFC. Still have a chance at the 1 seed, a slim chance, but have a chance at the 1 seed. They'll probably the lowest that they probably will go is 3. I don't think Dallas is going to catch them for the division. Obviously, you never know. But yeah, so look, they got to win. Kind of cool down a little bit. But let's see. Before we go to our unheralded player of the week, Steve asks, "Are we too top heavy on offense? I feel we won the Super Bowl because of our depth on offense, with the 3 very complete tight ends, 2 running backs, and 3 very solid receivers." So we have 3 solid receivers. Obviously, Brown and Smith. I think Zaccheaus is a really underrated third receiver. He just doesn't get the attention, but he had that really good block. Obviously, against Buffalo, had that touchdown. They have Swift and They like Gainwell. They don't use Scott in the running game. Then Penny's never dresses. The tight end, Zach Ertz, I'm shocked he hasn't signed anywhere. So maybe that, like, there was talk of him having 6 teams that wanted him. Maybe that was a lie.
Just trying to create a bid-in war
doesn't
by
make
his
sense.
agents.
There's 2 weeks left. You want to, if you're going to go to a team, you want to get in there and learn the system. I mean, obviously, if he comes to the Eagles, he knows the system. He was here under Sirianni for half a year. A little things change, but he knows the system. So, and it's probably similar to what they run in Arizona. But I'm kind of shocked that
I feel it's also all about usage of your assets, and I mean, they just haven't
remember the Dallas
figured
game,
out.
they only threw it to 3 players.
Exactly. I think you just have to, and also, like, they just haven't valued the tight end since Zach Ertz left. They put they gave Dallas Goedert the contract extension, and he's pretty much been the focal point of the tight end position. Running back, I mean, we got lucky with DeAndre Swift. I mean, I say lucky. That was just a really smart move to get DeAndre Swift. Are we going to bring him back next year? Probably not. He's probably going to be out of Howie's affordability range for a position that he doesn't really care to invest in either. I guess he says, I feel BJ makes the offense top heavy, but that goes back to just your ability to use multiple people. I mean, even when you look at, Patrick Mahomes and some of these guys, they throw to 6, 7, 8 wide receivers. And it's not like, oh, it's one target, one reception for 5 yards. Like, they go to these guys multiple times. And obviously Mahomes has nobody else to turn to. Obviously, he's got to target everyone and give everyone a chance, because each of them is going to give him at least 1 drop a game. So, but at the end of the day, I mean, it all comes back to, you need to be able to use all your players. I think I agree with you. Zaccheaus, I was skeptical of this signing originally, but he's kind of been underrated. He's a really hard-working wide receiver. He deserves way more snaps than Quez Watkins deserves, and he deserves to see more targets and be schemed into this offense. We talked about Covey earlier in the episode. I mean, there's an opportunity to use that guy in ways you're trying to use some of these guys, and it just isn't working out. So it's about using your personnel properly, and I think maybe Brian Johnson gives you this feeling that the offense is top heavy, but it never hurts to have that top heavy talent. But you have to have a willingness to use the ones behind them, and a trust in using the people that are behind the top of your pecking order, like behind Goddard. We saw Calcaterra can do stuff. Behind Brown and Smith, we've seen Jones can do stuff. We've seen Zaccheaus can do stuff. From a running back perspective, I mean, use them more as receivers. We know what Swift can do as a receiver. We know what Gainwell can do as a receiver. It's all about how you use your personnel, and it makes it feel worse than maybe it actually is. But that all goes back to Brian Johnson.
Yeah, he's got to figure out a way to scheme people open. I never got the vibe that Dallas Goedert or Jalen was too crazy about Ertz, especially Goddard. They asked him about him. He didn't seem like he wanted him here, but I mean, if he's going to help, he'll help. And Nick seems obsessed with Quez's straight line speed and those 2 bubble screen TDs he had a few years ago. Yeah, well, he doesn't fight for the ball. We saw that against Seattle. All right, so the Eagles won. They're 11-4. They got the Arizona Cardinals coming up. So before we finish off, Connor, let's go to our unheralded player of the week. Somebody that's not a star, somebody that, not the Lamar Jacksons of the world, not even Jalen Hurts of the world. Who's your unheralded player of the week for week 16 in the National Football League?
I'm going to that Vegas and Kansas City game because I was completely shocked by that. And I'm going to go with Zamir White. He had 22 carries for 145 yards. Didn't do anything on the receiving game. He didn't end up with a touchdown, but the ability to have a guy run for 145 yards on 22 carries, that's huge because that keeps the ball moving. That keeps the sticks moving. That's what put Kansas City behind the 8 ball and kept their defense reeling, was what Zamir White was able to do. And I kind of liked Zamir coming out. I mean, the story's unique. I mean, you weren't getting this guy who you were probably going to be able to trust for 6-7 years, but you were getting, like, he's torn both of his ACLs, and he was buried in a committee in Georgia. So he never really got the opportunity to shine like maybe he could have. And now he's buried behind Josh Jacobs. But when Josh Jacobs isn't healthy, he steps up in this type of way and was able to help the Vegas Raiders keep very slim playoff hopes alive. But I mean, makes you really think, are they finally going to give the interim coach the head coach tag? Because these guys play some hard for their interim coach. So, and another huge loss for the Chiefs.
Looking like he has a chance to become the head coach. I'm going with a kicker. I'm going Jason Sanders of the Miami Dolphins. He was 5 of 5, including the game winner against the Dallas Cowboys. And so I went with a kicker in Jason. And there was a bunch of kicker magic this past weekend.
You never pick a kicker. I picked a kicker before and you laughed at me. You just did it because it was Cowboys.
Probably. That could be right. But Elliott went 4 for 4. Another kicker went 5 for 5 as well. I can't remember off the top of my head who it was. But, so I'm going to go Jason Sanders because he beat Dallas and helped the Eagles out. And again, Dallas has lost 2 games in a row to teams that the Eagles beat. Just saying. But yes, so there are unheralded players of the week for week 16 in the National Football League. We'll be back Friday to get you set for week 17 in the Eagles' regular season home finale against the Jonathan Gannon-led Arizona Cardinals. Thank you for tuning in to the Kelly Green Hour. As always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Green Hour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LJHarrell54. Follow Edge of Philly Sports on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook at Edge of Philly Sports. Thanks for all the comments in the comments section. We will be back Friday to get you set for the Eagles and the Arizona Cardinals. Thanks for tuning in to the Kelly Green Hour.